Hey, good morning. I'm Tom Gaffney. I want to say thanks to Jason and all the team at Broadband Forum for this event, and especially good night last night. And also a big thanks to you that made it here early this morning. So thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about value connection and also do a bit of the threat landscape. So I think you mentioned that one as well. Very briefly, F-Secure, we are a cybersecurity company founded in Finland 35 years ago. Actually, our chief research officer first found the first virus that we got back in 1989 on a floppy disk. And one of the things that have been around a long time is we've got a lot of money. The first consumer security website back in 1996, first mobile security on Nokia devices in 2001 being finished. That's not a surprise. If anybody remembers Symbian being a thing. And we were the first to move signature databases to the cloud using machine learning back in 2008 and so on. And we serve through mainly telecoms providers. We've got 170 globally, AT&T in the US, Verizon, Docomo in Japan, Liberty Global, Vodafone, Telia, and etc. in Europe. And today we are going to talk about how we bring better value through the gateway and through our operator partners. I'm going to focus a little bit in the first half, at least, on the actual threat landscape, so I'll give you an idea of the things that both consumers and us face day to day. I'm also going to reference a concept, functional digital minimalism, as defined by a guy called Cal Newport in his novel, in his book. And not just because it's one of the more recent books I've read and I'm very easily influenced, but also because I think it's a concept which applies to not just end users, which is what Cal's talking about in his book, which is not about getting rid of technology, but about focusing on the things that are important. And that's a message which is really relevant for operators today, I think, because we live effectively in an attention economy. Right? Everybody's being bombarded with all kinds of data. Everybody wants a piece of that data, and it's trying to zone in on what is the most important things. So, we'll come back to that. Let's go to the security landscape. So, I'm not going to be surprised to hear a security guy say that security crime is rising. So, our last consumer survey, we've been doing this for 8 years. We found roughly, broadly, about a third of consumers have been hit by some kind of cybercrime in the last 12 months. Now, you get spikes in countries. Brazil, and strangely maybe for a European country, France is pretty high. I can actually point out that both those countries are heavy users of freeware solutions. So you kind of get what you pay for in this respect. And the kind of threats that people see are threats on devices. Identity theft is a very common one. I'll go through some specific examples here. Who makes the stuff? So there's a broad range of actors. If you look at the top of the pyramid here, responsible for creating a lot of the exploits that we face today are governments. So most governments in the world are involved in some kind of espionage, cyber espionage, looking for vulnerabilities so they can attack each other. That matters because what they create leaks out into the wider world. It's a really good, slightly old, but really good example of this was back in 2017. We had something called WannaCry, which was a virus which spread across the world, targeting Windows devices, attacked millions of users around the world in different countries. WannaCry was an exploit created by the US government. They found two vulnerabilities in Microsoft systems, created the exploit. It was stolen by the, I always get the order on this wrong, stolen from them by the Russians. It was instead, in turn, stolen by the Israelis from the Russians, and then finally by the North Koreans from the Israelis. And they created the exploit kit, which then went out into the world and became the thing that we call WannaCry. So it matters what the governments do. It leads down the chain. You have cyber gangs, cyber criminals who will target enterprises, high-end businesses, things like ransomware. We've seen a lot of in the past, not so much now. And these are companies, these guys act like corporations. They've got developers, they've got software testers, run just like any other big business. It's really huge. And then down the bottom, they are the ones also responsible for distributing what we call mass attacks, so phishing, spamming, that kind of thing, which is the things that most of us interact with on a daily basis. Typical kind of threats are at a device level, anyway. The big thing we see currently are Infostealers. So Infostealers are actually a component of what used to be ransomware attacks. So it used to be multi-payload attacks. So first part of it would be dropping an Infostealer, which would collect telemetry from the device. So it'll tell you, is it a laptop, is it a server, does it have admin rights, and so on. But they also had other capability like collecting passwords or session cookies in browsers. So eventually criminals realized that itself is of huge value. So Infostealers have become more prevalent than ransomware attacks. Actually, ransomware attacks used to be the biggest thing. In fact, if I'd shown you this slide 2 years ago, it would be ransomware #1 by distance. But since the invasion of Ukraine, that's fallen off a cliff. So you can make your own conclusions about where that came from. The other more recent thing we're seeing, particularly for consumers, is scams. And scams is quite a broad term. It doesn't just mean like what you think of URLs. Scams relates to buying goods that don't exist. I'll give some examples of this. The most common delivery mechanisms for this, or currently the most common, is phone calls and SMS messages, but we also see a lot of exploits in social media and other channels like that. Identity theft is, got a few slides on this one because identity theft is just incredible. So, more than half of people that are impacted by identity theft lose money. In different countries, there's a different approach to this. Quite often, governments put the onus of this onto the bank or the cardholder to recompense, but that's not the case in every time. I live in the UK. We're increasingly seeing the banks starting to ask a lot of questions to users about, how they lost the money in the identity theft. And if you don't answer the questions in the right way, then you don't get your money back. And we're seeing that as becoming a trend, so it has a direct impact. One of the trivial questions from our survey is, would you rather lose your car or your identity? And most of the respondents answered the identity because of the direct monetary loss. I think the US figure is something like $3,000 per identity theft. So it has a big impact. And people lose their identities in several ways, but the two big ones are, the first one is account takeover. So that is where the organization that you've created an online account with is hacked. It's out of your control. So if they get hacked and they take your username and password, they'll go away and resell it. An example of that is British Airways, who I have an account with, they were targeted in 2019. 500,000 users' usernames and passwords were leaked. I got an email within 24 hours from some hackers saying, we've got video of you doing things on your laptop that you don't want the world to see. I'd like to say that's not true, but it was really interesting how quickly they came up with that message. It was really good. The other big one is, of course, infection on devices. So roughly just under a third of credentials are stolen by users having devices infected. And the problem here is there's really poor hygiene amongst a lot of users in terms of what their passwords are. So people tend to reuse the same passwords, or they basically have really weak passwords in the first place. And I have a pet peeve, certain organizations don't enforce nice password hygiene when you have to create it, or they allow things that are too easy, or they don't allow cutting and pasting from password managers, whatever. That has an impact because criminals know if you've got the same password, if they get the password for your gym or your school or whatever entity it is, then likely that's the same password for your Gmail account. So they'll get into your Gmail account, and that's where a lot of people store their credentials and their personal information. So it's a kind of chain where they'll try and exploit it and move on. And then to move it a little on to the IoT things, like Jason was saying. There's a large awareness amongst consumers that they need to protect their personal devices. So laptops, mobile phones, there's a really strong market for buying antivirus, has been for more than 20 years. But there's a growing awareness we see as well with people understanding that there are threats with their IoT devices. Not just threats actually, but also privacy impacts. It depends how into the privacy topic you are. Again, this is a cultural thing, but a lot of the smart speakers out there are collecting hugely personal information based on what you do and where you place the device in your home. And to give an example of that, this is the current graph here. You see, is actually one of our customers based in the US who's got our security running in the routers of their customers. They've got roughly a base of 200,000 customers doing that. And we see just over 5% of those customers having persistent threats coming from IoT devices, or devices that are compromised, consistently sending malicious traffic. And the range of devices is huge. From a security perspective, our favorite is always to talk about IP cameras and baby monitors, because they have really lousy security. Lots of default passwords there, a lot of them don't update, you can't update them remotely. The whole point of many IoT devices is that they've got to be plug and play. And the compromise for that is that they don't have security baked in. Now that situation is massively improving in the US and in Europe, but a lot of these goods are bought in Southeast Asia, and there the security is just an afterthought quite often. It's a bit broad brush, but that's kind of it. And as a security company, we've done a lot of hacks. So we've hacked everything from, we hacked the early edition IoT devices, we hacked the early Echo devices, we've hacked hotel key entry systems, we've hacked, this is why I love this quote, because what people don't realize is who's finding these exploits and who's doing it. Well, the thing is, there's a bunch of researchers and geeks out there. We've got a lot of them in Helsinki in Finland. People love to just buy the latest gadgets and then see where the flaws lie. So we get a whole ton of that stuff. And I'm not going to go through this one. There's want to give you a little kind of insight into how the guys in the labs think. So we kind of try and break it down into different areas. So we have, I can't see my screen because I'm going to glass on, but it's basically methodology-based, target-based, platform-based, and AI-based. So the methodology-based is typically looking at financial scams. So you have phishing, which is obviously a fraudulent attempt to get users' credentials in some method. We have the identity theft, which I've already mentioned. We have the really cruel and manipulative emotional attacks, which we've seen a lot of, particularly during lockdown. There was a lot of online dating and a lot of exploits, people getting into relationships and asking for money and exploiting people's state of mind. Then at the top we have the target base, which is more, again, targeted towards high net worth individuals and companies. And then we have on the right the platform base, which is what we consider the more traditional online attacks, so on online shopping, URL, phishing, and so on. And then down the bottom one, we have the AI. Troy referenced the AI in his talk. Now, it's a huge thing for us, both from a defensive play, but also, we're seeing cyber criminals really exploiting it as an offensive way. I'll give you a couple of examples here. So the main one we see is deepfakes. The newish one is voice cloning. But also the generative capability of large language models to easily create images and texts is something that the criminals are really going after. An example of that is the OpenAI Abuse. So Amazon launched generative language model for sellers, I think it was September last year. So it allows sellers to basically really easily create product descriptions, images. Yeah, I see that. That's on the top right there. And the idea is just to get it up and easy to get your product on sale. But guess what? So the criminals saw that, and we've got a bunch of botnets distributing via, creating fake accounts in various social media channels, and then generating a lot of products that just don't exist. What you see in the top right hand side, Jason was just laughing at, is what happens occasionally when those bots fall foul of the OpenAI recognition algorithms. So it's a good example of it. Deepfakes. So this is, on the left, this is a video made by a company called Solana. You see there the CEO, Anatoly Yakovenko. Started doing really cool stuff with blockchain and 5G, trying to improve connectivity. And on the left-hand side is the formal video that he shot, which was talking about the latest investments in the technology. On the right-hand side is the deepfake, which got up about a week later. It's you cannot tell the difference. I'm not going to play the videos here. Please feel free to go, actually, we're going to share this material afterwards so you can run it if you're interested. And it sounds like him, it looks like him, but this one's a complete fake with over 500,000 views in 2 days. And it's pushing people towards a cryptocurrency threat. And the crypto works like, there's too much animation here, sorry. The crypto works kind of like this. So, they create the website, they're hosting it. Obviously, you can see the URL's a bit off here, but whoever looks at the URL, most users don't do that. So something will steer the user towards that URL. Typically, it will be fake accounts. And creating fake accounts is so easy. So you can create Insta accounts, X accounts, and so on. And then you have different bots, and you link your bots, and they like each other, and so they get up and they start to look legitimate. We've seen examples, for example, on X with the blue tick with bot accounts on them. So it's kind of, they'll even pay for this, invest in it, because it's worth their while. So then they will spin you towards the video. The video tells you how you can improve your cryptocurrency, you can double your money effectively. It sounds too good to be true, it kind of is. And it points you towards a QR code, you go towards a QR code, and at this point they're asking you for your crypto wallet. So they're asking you to make a small payment to kind of authorize and get the ball rolling. And then you'll get a reward back in the form of something that allows you to take more money. At which point, of course, you don't get any money, and the scammer will take yours. Once they've harvested that particular attack over a period, can be anything depending how successful it is, from less than a day to maybe a week. They'll take that down, and then they'll start again. create a new website, and then rinse and repeat. And at some point when this video gets too well known, then they'll create a new deepfake. So this was a kind of nice high profile example I thought was relevant for this audience, but I could have pulled you thousands. We see them everywhere. So that's my whistle stop. Too much animation. Talk through the deepfakes. Voice cloning, this is really cool. So we had one, it's actually a couple of years old, but in the UK, a UK company. So it's a subsidiary of a German company. Their CEO, their MD, actually got a call from what he thought was the CFO of the German mother company, asking him to authorize payment to a supplier in Hungary, which he did. Bless you. And that was worth just under $250,000 US. Really interestingly, on the right-hand side, this is a case from the last 3 weeks in Sweden, and it's a variation on a kidnapping scam. So a mother receives a message from her daughter saying, "Hey mum, I've swapped my mobile number, this is my new one." That's on the text. Mum replies back, "All good, got it, thanks." Next text from daughter is, "Bank stopped my credit card, I need to pay the rent, it's like €1,000, can you take it from me and I'll pay it back?" And Mum's like, "Sure, I can do it." Mum goes to make the payment, bank sees it's to a cryptocurrency account and blocks it, at which point mother calls daughter on the new number. Has what she believes to be a 1-minute conversation with her daughter, thinking that it is, she comes away in interviews afterwards, everything she says about the conversation says that she believed it was her daughter, but it wasn't her daughter at all. It was obviously a voice clone was pulled together from various social media accounts that her daughter had left lying around. And then the payment goes through. So that's another one missing. So that's the threat part. So we'll move on to the actual broadband forum kind of things. So all of this leads to a level of complexity for consumers, right? Because they're aware that there's some kind of security thing happening they need to deal with, but they don't know what it is. 10 years ago, this picture was pretty easy. We're sitting at home, we're on a laptop, we're on a mobile phone. We had point solutions for that, like antivirus. But then we had the IoT devices. We're never going to put antivirus on a connected TV. We're not going to do that connected toaster. It kind of doesn't work. There are other contexts. So what about when users leave the home? What about kids who, they're vulnerable to the same things, but also extra vulnerability, of course, around what's appropriate content. And then we have our online personas. So there's a number of moving balls here which make it complex for an end user to understand what's the right security, how to employ it. And then by default, those of us that serve the consumer, how do we pull this together to protect them? And we do that by making it more complex. No, we don't. But this diagram does make it look like that, I realize. So, our approach to this, and this is not a product pitch because most of our competitors do something similar. I'm just giving you kind of like an insight into how we do it. So we provide embedded components, whether it's cloud APIs that you can do URL checks with to see if they're malicious. We provide plugins for browsers, so you can add browsing protection into the online experience. Or increasingly on the right-hand side, we provide SDKs. So SDKs for mobile platforms, so you can take the components of the security and embed them into your own in-store operator app. And increasingly, and the thing that we think is a significant way forward is obviously adding a layer of protection into the home through the router. So we have an SDK which goes into the router itself. Now that has posed some challenges, which I'm going to be pretty open with. But we do think that the router serves one of the most strategic pillars in terms of providing protection. It's great because if it's running on a router, you can enable it using USP or some other mechanism. Is there such another mechanism? It's USP, right?
I'm not sure.
So you can enable it in the router, and it's automatically there for the customer, and then we can do a lot of traffic checking in there. There are some other kind of points in here to consider. I think that the router is pretty much the last real estate that operators have that they can directly influence. You could argue that the network's something like that. That's a debate I'm happy to have afterwards. But nonetheless, the router represents the true edge of the network. And with the investments in routers that's taking place today, Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7, these routers all have a lot of compute, a lot of estate that can run other applications other than the core Wi-Fi connectivity. There's opportunity here to do more in the router. But there have been issues around how we get it onto the router in the first place and how we deploy it. I'd argue any router in the last 5 years, we can pretty much get our security on and working fine. The management of it can be complex. And to kind of bring that to light, or to explain some of the challenges, and we've had to address problems in-house as well, how we go about it. So, our application, it's a standalone binary, performs its security functions inside, and we've traditionally delivered in kind of two models. What we have is we call the integrated model, so providing our SDK that runs in user space and on Linux with hooks down to the kernel that we get with the vendor, or more increasingly in the containerized world. There is some legacy Docker stuff, but pretty much everybody's doing it at sea, right? So that's pretty much the way forward. But there's complexity here as well when you look at it from the operator's perspective. So, this trying to find this functional minimalism here for the operator. When they're trying to build or connect the connected home, they've obviously got to deal with the router vendor, which is the bottom quadrant of this grid here. But if you look around it as well, they also need to engage with the management supplier, so who's going to manage the ACS for them. They may, depending on their scale, deal directly with the chipset vendors. There will be other third-party applications like us, like motion capture or home security, automation, all of these kind of things. There's a lot of moving parts for the operators to manage. And depending on their scale, some of them invest significantly in this, very significantly, and others will just look for something that they can take that's easy and off the shelf. So trying to kind of help get an adoption of services delivered through the router, we need to, as an industry, kind of work towards a situation where there's a common delivery model or a common understanding of how we can do this better. We actually had to learn some lessons ourselves from the early days. When we started doing our first projects in this area, we would create the Wi-Fi binary. We would then go through an integration process with an ODM vendor, who that would take some time. Then they would go through their whole test cycle, go through the QA process, and at the end of whatever that time was, we would get to a point where we would deliver something to the operator. But if we found any bugs along the way, then we have to start the whole process again. What this meant to us is that we could get into projects that should take a couple of months. Actually, we have one example of a project started 4 years ago in the early days and stuff that took over a year to get out to market. It gets huge delays and it adds costs, and it stops us being able to do other things and innovate, and obviously the customer starts to get bored and lose interest. So we need to do things differently. And we put our house in order. I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of that, but we also, as part of that thinking, thought about, well, how is this done better in other arenas? And the big one is, the obvious example is the app stores. So you've got Google, Apple, Microsoft to a degree, and even in cloud services, what AWS have done as well. You've got common platforms which allow for delivery of new services in clearly defined framework. So you've generally got pretty robust documentation, pretty good community of guys that can support you. So this is kind of a gold standard. And you actually might not like their model, you might not like their revenue shares or however they work, but as a model functionally, it works really effectively. And it really comes into play when you talk about how you manage the upgrade and lifecycle process. So if you look, one of the reasons why those models are very successful is because they have limited diversity of platforms, right? So Apple, it's pretty much just the Apple device, last 2 versions supported. Android has a few more faults, same with Windows, but pretty much it's a common platform. Whereas in the world of CPE, we've got every different ODM has their own, or has legacy anyway, at least had their own kind of stack, their own variation on OpenWT, their own variation on RDK, whatever it might be. And that makes managing the release and deployment one. Now again, thinking back to the App Store model, if you have created an app and you've got it published in the App Store, if you want to update the functionality or fix a bug, you just do it and you push it out, and it's already replicated to the user's phone, assuming they've got auto updates on, but it's a very simple process. As an industry, actually this is where, but USP is a significant improvement here, and we've seen some major developments in USP which really help this platform upgrade process work. With our friend Carlos from Kayan sitting at the back there and some guys at Incognito, we've got a nice working demo of updating our application to a KO router using the Incognito USP platform. So we can manage that independently of the router firmware itself. And that's significant because it doesn't require the operator have to worry about doing a whole monolithic upgrade process on the actual router itself. So it's a really effective way of managing things. We also fixed our own internal platform. So skipping through the animation, sorry. So, instead of going through this monolithic project delivery every time we get a new customer and we start to work in an environment, we decoupled all of the interfaces. So we built the core security components, the standalone functions. We released our first family variant, we call that, so that's the OpenWRT variant back in Q3 last year. And the only thing that changes is the actual interfaces that hooks to the platform itself. So less than 5% of the development effort. And that means that when we're shipping something, it's already general release from us. So from a security functions perspective, it's solid. The only thing that we're then doing on integration in QA with the ODM vendor are the actual interfaces. So it massively reduces the whole test and delivery process. Takes it down from months to literally weeks. And it means that when we've got it down to the customer and they're testing it, if they have things they want to see that are better, like features or integration, that will be taken to the product development roadmap. It's not actually fixing bugs or issues that are related to the deployment, because we've already done that as we've gone through. So our process has suddenly changed to the point that now we're delivering this family binary, and I was going to say that we've done the OpenWRT, purple one's coming for us in Q2, and then we're going to RDKB. But the binary that we deliver comes with full documentation and a test suite. We give that to the ODM, we'll give them some guidance, training if they need it, they go ahead, they make the build. And then they return it back to us and we run test acceptance query using QA Cafe, actually. There you go. And then we release it and deliver it to the operators to run. So instead of taking months, we're now taking weeks to get the process done. But there's still room for improvement, and that room for improvement from our perspective and from an industry challenge is in the actual container itself. So you've got people like Purple who are just doing amazing things in terms of standardizing what that container environment looks like. We've still got some way to go on the low-level APIs. They're still sort of vendor-specific. And we're quite happy to see those standardized across all of the security vendors. We're happy to compete on being a security company of choice. We want the actual mechanism for how you get into the router to be pretty standard. Any special tweaks and things, there may be value in doing that, but I don't see scale for an industry when what we're trying to do is get lots more users and declutter, the experience for the operator to purchase and get these services up and running. So to get that adoption, we need to see a lot of improvement there. That said, I don't know if anybody read the Omdia report, came out last year, which was sponsored by Broadband for it. So in that you saw something like a quarter of operators saying that they're now moving towards container or moving to or deployed containerized solutions. I think if you looked at that figure like 3 years ago, it would have been under 5%.
It would have been, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's a clear direction of travel, and I believe that benefits the industry as a whole, not just security. Whether it's motion capture, whether it's gaming applications, whatever the next big thing are. The routers represent an opportunity of real estate to deliver additional value to your customers, and it would be great if we can get the industry to a point where we can be like USP, where you've got a really nice support and release process. How can we simplify the delivery of the application in the first place? That's our goal. Because the main thing we want to get to is a point where we can spend our time doing innovation, so we can create new services that both telcos and consumers really want to use, and not spend our time having to bug fix and work out issues around integration. And that's my close. Thank you very much.
Any questions immediately? I'm going to throw a softball. And actually, Carlos knows the answer to this question too. Okay. Just how fast the deployment cycles, I've heard this quote before, going from X to Y in terms of just how fast is this now versus what it used to be.
We got a partner in Europe, mentioned like that. They took so we launched a partner program last year, because one of the things we wanted to do is just make this self-manageable and scalable. And we've got a European-based router partner who took our application. They got the application running in 2 days. They did the cloud API connections for the management. They had the whole service up and running within 2 weeks. I'd say their QA was about another 2 weeks on top of that, because they're pretty thorough. They wanted to make sure it didn't impact on the throughput latency and all of those good things. So I would say inside a month.
Yeah. Which is totally insane when you think about it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Before I go on.
It's early, everybody's early. So some people were.
Yeah. No, I just want to point out that your final slide is tying back exactly into what Troy was saying at the beginning, right? And the gateway, and we'll say other CPE too, but the gateway really is, now that the now that the customer's network is everything about their consumer electronics experience, right? Not just, having pieces of plastic that sit by themselves with a screen on it and probably don't connect to anything, you throw them away when they break, right? It's the entire home network is about the customer experience, and it's exactly what we said. It's like the router is the thing that it sees all of those things, right? And so it really is kind of not the last, but the biggest opportunity, but also the biggest evidence that the operator is going to be asked to take responsibility for these things anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you've got something running in the agent, and a lot of people in this room will be familiar with it, one of the struggles that operators have is identifying the device. Kind of to Troy's point about managing connectivity of devices, one of the big blind spots is operators don't really see what the devices are in now. They can kind of understand on a level, on a MAC address, they might get an operating system. A lot of the IoT devices are not very good at broadcasting consistent information about what they are. You can't see firmware versions, manufacturers. It's often quite difficult to detect them. So it's one of the things that we built into the agent. Again, our competitors do the same thing, is how do we do this better? So how can we serve, as security starts for us with identifying what the actual device is. And that data itself is quite meaningful to our operating partners from a support context, like Troy was talking about, and even from a marketing upsell.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about from the Omni report was how there was this one of the questions that we asked that I didn't expect the answer to be so shocking, was what the operator values as most important in their CPE, and security was, I think, 70. It was like 75%, and like the next most important thing was actually quality, and it was only like 50%.
I remember that stat. I was really struck by that as well. So it was you will of course expect quality and price, but yeah, security was absolutely huge up there.
Yeah.
And that's partly because they understand there's threats to their customers, also the actual security of the router itself.
Right.
I did the threat landscape earlier on, but we've seen a really big spate of, there's a particular router vulnerability that's exploited by something called VPN filter. That's really advanced, again, Russian state created, but leaked out, so used by lots of different people. VPN filter not just allows the hacker to control the device, and hackers want to control these devices because they use them for mining crypto, distributing spam, or doing denial of service attacks.
Right.
The VPN filter is special because it also collects browser information, so it can steal credentials for browsers, and it's unique amongst the threats that we see in that it's persistent. So a lot of the ways to fix infections on IoT devices is tell the customer to restart it. Ideally reboot, but restart it often clears things, but VPN filter is persistent, it always survives a reboot.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I got away from the sidetrack.
No, please. So I just wanted to point out that because the gateway is becoming more powerful, it is now a bigger target because it can run those things, right? Yeah. Where it couldn't before. And what's puts it as a catch-22 for us, and is in the importance about monitoring and management, is that if you get something on something that you're using every day, like your laptop, and it's starting to crunch the resources enough because it's trying to do, it's trying to use it as its processing power to do something else, you'll notice, right? Yeah. Or you have virus scanners on your laptop that will tell you that something's wrong, but not with the gateway right now, because for most consumers, we ignore it. Right?
That's right. Most people are concerned about the connectivity, of course. Right. And they want to make sure the Wi-Fi connection. But you're right. There is, for us, from a security perspective, and there's lots of other benefits to doing things there. Is essentially, to summarize, the closer you are to a device, the better the level of security you can do. So, something on device is always going to be most effective because you're kind of almost at operating system level. You can do sandboxing, deception, stuff like that. The router is a really effective way because, again, you've got visibility of the traffic inside that home. You can see what's happening inside the network because not everything passes through into the operator's network. So you've got more opportunities to spot malicious things.
Yeah. All right.
Hi, my name is Wojciech. I'm from Xero. And one of the major design choices that we're struggling with right now is how to provide some segmentation for the IoT devices. So they're not especially over the mesh networks. So they're not directly in the same broadcast domain as the other user devices. And I'm trying to figure out which is the way forward. Should we use VLANs over the mesh, or should we rather try to employ applications like yours, I guess, to block those flows in the same broadcast domain, which is tricky over a mesh, right? So maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Because obviously our application is third party to the router, and the router performs kind of functions you're talking about,
Yeah.
Jake, I think. We struggled a little bit with this one as well. So initially, our approach to design for simplicity, because you've got to be really careful with IoT devices. Obviously, if you impact on the traffic at all, you can prevent the device functioning the way it should. As a side example, Samsung made a fridge which has got effectively a mail server in it, but whatever, but it has. And some of them got compromised with a botnet. So we blocked the fridge, and one of the impacts of that was it stopped acting like a fridge. So we have to be really careful about how you action or what you do when you see something like that. So VLAN, it could work. Complex, maybe we can chat about this one later. The simplest way we did it was to create auto groups that once we understand it's an IoT device, that we recommend to the user, add this to this particular SSID or try and isolate it somehow like that. That's the simplest way we can see it. But even that we find is a little bit complicated for a lot of users to get their heads around, because a lot of people don't create guest networks or different kinds of SSIDs. Not really answering your question, but it's an interesting one.
I actually did, right? Because if we are going to use different SSIDs for IoT devices, which for me is the way to go, then we can assign those SSIDs to different broadcast domains, right? And that's over the mesh network. That is actually the only solution that kind of works. But it's also kind of new in home network to have VLANs even only over the Wi-Fi.
I totally agree. Managing the user experience in that is a bit tricky though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Perfect. Hi Tom, Arne Schulz, Vodafone. Thanks for the insights. I like this comment on containerization because we are also trying to move in that direction. We made a lot of progress on the northbound using USP to standardize the interfaces, data model basically. But what we still see challenging is basically making containerization really happening towards the chipset, the SDK level, the different router models, RDK, Purple, whatever. And you mentioned this concept of getting the whole industry to move in that direction. So what would be your next steps to make this integration towards the devices and the different platforms really easier?
That's a good question. Thank you, Arne. You're absolutely right, by the way. So the chipset manufacturers have been, let's say, the elephant in the whole containerization room because they've been the last to engage with that ecosystem. It's not going to improve unless they get on board. The good news is, I don't know if you follow how much you're following the Purple, but as of Purple Foundation and Network X last year, you basically got all the major chipset vendors on this. So Qualcomm, EDTech, a bunch of those are now actually fully engaged. And it's really being driven by your peers. So, all of this stuff moves forwards when operators with the scale of Vodafone say, we want to do this. That is truthfully how this kind of moves forward. So you're the guys that have the power to be able to bring these people to the table. And in the Purple arena release, we're seeing that happen. I think you're an RDK house, right? I'm not so close to the RDK, we're following it lightly. We've seen a lot of containerization when it comes to set-top boxes. When it comes to routers, I think they're a little bit behind. And it needs that critical push from you and your big scale.
Tom, can I just add on that? So I think there are two elements. Projection. So just to add on that, so I think on top of what you said, the commitments, right? So we need the SOC commitments, but also the operator's commitment to drive that. So there are two elements here, right? Which is the open source and standardization. Because those two elements will give the scale that is required, regardless of the operating system that operators will deploy, to really drive, for example, elements like USP to the next level, right? So just wanted to add on top of that. Yeah.
No, absolutely right, Carlos, yeah. need a break if you want to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom.